It ain't fucking Zoom. Fuck those people.
On this special edition of Beat Motel, we have Mike Watt, the legendary Mike Watt, and he's going to talk about how bass builds empathy. He's going to tell us about how majors are the sucker boy lottery, and he's also going to tell us about I lost it. On this, and he's also going to explain how Jay Mascis has balls like church bells, which I think might be one of the best phrases I've ever heard. Let's get on with it then, shall we? Let's play the... You're listening to the Beat Motel podcast, and we need to warn you that we like to use words like fuck, shit, and syndicalist, butty scrutux, angry flap, and foot biscuits. And we don't often bleep those words out, apart from because we're not complete animals. But if you understand that and you like music, then listen on. So we just don't really have guests on Beat Motel. We have guest co-hosts when Sam's off polishing his Elgin marbles or whatever he does when he's not on this. But this time, Sam reached out to Mike Watt. And if you're listening to this, you don't know who Mike Watt is, Dr. Sam is now going to tell you.
I think it's like a Christmas present for myself, man. Mike Watt is the bass player who is probably outside Paul Simonon, probably the most famous and most important bass player in punk rock, and in many ways much more important than Paul Simonon. And we know him from the Minutemen, fIREHOSE, Stooges. He played when the Stooges came back, and for them, and that was sort of how I got introduced to them. I think the first time I saw Mike Watt, he was leaning against an amp on a stage in a field in London, I think Victoria Park, and But he's also done so much more besides. He's like in the last 5 years, he's ventured out. The last 15 years, I guess, he's ventured out as like jazz projects, and he does some spoken word stuff. I mean, he's like and just the man just seems to endlessly tour and endlessly record, and he's sort of an unstoppable force of punk rock nature.
He is an unstoppable force of nature, and we're going to hear from him now. We need to explain this was recorded on Discord, on Mike's request, actually, so this is not going to be as crystal clear as our recordings usually are, but what does that matter when you're speaking to Mike? Right, let's get into it. Editing Andrew here. In the future, the Discord footage was completely unusable, out of sync, and it drifted, and I spent a long trying to fix it, but I just couldn't, so this is audio only. Sorry about that.
What's your oldest flannel shirt, man?
Okay, I'll tell you about that. It has to do with bass, you being bass players. I don't know how it was when you started, but D. Boone's mom put me on bass now. The first gig we saw was T-Rex, and so all we knew was arena rock. We were 14, it was 1973. And, yeah, you see him written on the credits on record covers, but you couldn't hear that shit at the gigs. You know, so when I met D. Boone, the only rock and roll band he knew was Creed. Bill Curry, good bass guy. Even he ended up having pizza things up in the city. Stu Cook. He also produced that Evil One, Rocky Erickson record. I couldn't tell what he was doing, man. In fact, I thought they were guitars with only 4 strings. I didn't know they had bigger strings because he was so far away, you know. And so, you know, he's got, I don't know, foot of grape juice. He had to use 4 or 5 quarters to keep the needle on these motherfuckers from jumping out. So the fidelity was not happening. So I couldn't tell what was going on that part of the music. Plus, there's no culture for it. Where I come from, like writing songs, right? I don't even write songs till we go to clubs and the movement. But anyway, I'm looking at the album covers. Obviously, he's not using them for the records. They're all scratchy shit. But I noticed the singer and his shirts. And, you know, Mark Boland's got the boa. And I'm from Navy Housing. I don't know lumberjack or fucking farmers or stuff. So I think this is his rock and roll shirts. So I thought, man, if I wear this kind of shirt, maybe he'll still like me because I cannot tell what this motherfucker. It was you guys, Jack Bruce, Scottish guy talking about. big info. I can hear this on the records. I could hear Geezer Butler. I can hear Andy Fraser, Pete Quaife, the England producers, you know, Chas Chandler. You can hear the bass. I could hear it. On the U.S. stuff, I could hear James Jamerson, the Motown, and then even on AM radio, car radio, and later, who's this guy? Sly's man, Larry Graham.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I could hear the R&B guys, but a lot of the rock and roll stuff, I couldn't hear what the bass was going on. I couldn't tell, you know. I think the first U.S. stuff I could hear the bass that was what you would call, you know, stadium rock or shit, was maybe the Dennis Dunaway, Alice Cooper, or Joe Bouchard on the Blue Oyster Cult. You know, maybe some of that. But it was really overseas, you guys, and then R&B guys. That's where I could hear bass parts. And how it was, especially with the Motown, it was interesting the way they hooked the drums up to the singer. I thought, oh, that's what the bass is. It's some kind of thing like that. And I also found out socially, maybe it's where you put your retarded friend. I read something about John Lennon, but his painter buddy on the bass, right? This guy didn't even want to play. Like, we got this game called baseball, right? It's kind of ripped off from cricket, but anyway, there's a part called right field where, like, when you're kids, everybody's left-handed, so nobody hits the fucking ball out there. So that's where you put like bass. But then when the movement came, it all changed, man. I met kids. They picked that first, because even with the professionals, except for James Jamerson, he comes from the stand-up bass. But all these rests are really good. Joe Osborne, Carol Kay, they're actually guitar players looking for work. Because real bass players won't play Leo Fender's invention. They think it's kind of a toy. But see, they can't record the stand-up. Okay, so it's the old kind of thing, you know, trade-off world, right? And James Jamerson, he don't care. Although I heard he wouldn't intone it. He didn't have a lot of respect for it, but he knew the reality. Well, now, Barry Gordy doesn't put his name on any of his records, but he's heard at least. We were conking at some dude's house. I finally played Savannah again. It's been like 40 years. And we conked at this cat who had I don't know, maybe his grandpa in Nashville, one of the first studios. It depended on the key of the song where you put the fucking stand-up bass. Because these things do not record that well with microphones. And they didn't have these piezo pickups on the bridge yet. You know, it's a strange thing about humans and their inventions, and then putting them to use. Technology actually means kind of a science that you use. But a lot of ways, right, it's an into itself, and shit hoarding and stupid excuses for not really getting anything created. But on the other hand, it is a reality on the dealio. And for example, Chariot, 2 wheels. 6,000 years later, bicycle, 2 wheels. The only thing they add is another axle. They don't even invent a new fucking part. It took them that long. I'm not even talking about the pedal shit, you know, where they just used feet, the 1700s. So, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. And you hate to say it, or maybe it's a good thing, but sometimes the aesthetic gets informed by the ethic, and probably the other way around. So I'm very grateful that D-Boon's ma put me on bass. I think it's still finding itself. I think it's still mysterious. I mean, we owe Mr. Jamerson so much.
So
those guys.
You're not like
where you
bored
guys
of it at all. You never.
Man, I haven't even moved on to the 5-string. There's so much to learn. See, here's the physics thing on bass. Because of the wavelength. the more notes you play, the littler you get. So it's always a search for the best notes, not the most. And this is why fusion is so terrible. You know, the more humans do something, the more and more they want to do with that thing. And bass actually slaps you down from that because you'll get tinier and tinier and more insignificant. And especially away from, I mean, the word itself is foundation, you know, and this aiding and abetting the tune. You get further and further away the more notes you play. There's a great guy. Here's another guy from where you guys live. Herbie Flowers. Very econo. That shit he does on Walk on the Wild Side with the stand up and the electric both glisten in the opposite direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, really clever stuff.
Yeah. That's fucking econo. You know what I mean? And you can hear that on the AM radio. You know, you don't need high fidelity. That was such a. I mean, that snare drum thing is happening too. Of course, the words. You know, Little Joe never once gave it away.
Hey man, I was wondering about like your.
Truth be told. Truth be told.
I was wondering about your relationship to jazz. Because I was listening to the Three Layer Cake album earlier, and those guys are, you know, sort of, they seem steeped in like modern jazz stuff, but also, like, I was also listening to the Coltrane album that you were part of, and I don't think I've ever heard you walk before.
They got me into Downbeat magazine. I've been like right now I got the Jonathan Grassi. A lot of these fucking writers are terrible, but I'm interested in the people. Okay. See, for me, music's music. I really got tired of this genre shit. But when you're talking about Raymond Pettibon first played me John Coltrane, where I found out that's who it was. It was after a Germs gig, and he played me Ascension. And I knew the guy was older, but I thought he was a punk rocker. I didn't know he was dead. I didn't know what. So he starts bringing me to gigs. You get to see his drummer, Elvin Jones. He lived in Nagasaki, so a lot of his gigs, the tours started in Hollywood, a club called Catalina on Cahuenga. And he starts bringing me to see these beboppers where you could sit 2 tables away, you know, little scene and stuff. And so I kind of related it to our movement, you know. It was tiny in the 70s punk and Hollywood scene, you know. Kind of knew these people, but you didn't know them really, but you see them every weekend. But, you know, it was kind of like that. And the music was so personal, you know. So that's, you know, when I look back on the movement, it was really anti-arena rock. Can you imagine, you know, I mean, Raymond took me to see Miles Davis at the Hollywood Bowl, and Dexter Gordon had a little trio open up. You know, it's about small music, small pad music, club music. You know? But he's the guy, and he's written me a lot of lyrics, but he's mainly a painter. You know, so my gateway into that is actually not a musician, but he's an artist. The way I got involved with Three Layer Cake, if you want to jump ahead 45 years, 50 years, is for the last 24 years and 7 months, I've had this show called The Watt from Pedro Show. And the drummer man who ended up editing, mixing, producing those Three Layer Cake albums and picked me a third guy, Brandon Seabrook, is Mike Pride. And he's a drummer man, Chester, New York, where he lives. And Never met him in person, but he was a guest on my Walk from Pedro. And he's talking about Milford Graves and this improvisation stuff. Now, I go back, you know about Dos?
Yeah.
It was Spanish for two. Me and Kay had this band with two basses for like 35 years. And the way we made the first record was trading cassette tapes through the U.S. mail, 4-track cassette. She had, after Black Flag, she had a internship at Yale, Connecticut. Well, I used that same kind of paradigm, you know, with WAV files on the internet. So I just pretended Mike Pride was there. I got a little Pro Tools HD setup thing here, my pad. And I just pretended he sent me these drum things, and I just played to it like he was there, you know, and I was improvising. I didn't go back and edit or stuff like that. I just played right to it like he was there. And I sent it back to him, and then he sent that to Brandon Seabrook. And
did you have any like
there's two different labels,
chords or anything?
two different labels, but they were done the same way. In fact, the second one was done on D. Boone's B-Day. I said, it's his B-Day. Why don't you send me some more drum tracks? And I did it the same way. I pretended he was there. What's that?
Did you do it on like? I mean, did you have like any structured ideas beforehand? Like you'd set out some chord structures or anything? Like
Yeah.
That?
Look, one of the things about this book here, you know, I read the other shitty book, the only one that was available for 30 years. What's his name? Sycamore and Tepperman. I can't remember his fucking. Anyway, it's terrible. But yeah, he served about a year and a half with Chico Hamilton, a drummer band leader. Chico Hamilton could not get credit for songwriting. This is how, you know, the bigotry and shit runs through all human kind of thing endeavors. I guess the notes are too short, but I was really interested in this idea, you know, having guests on my show and talking to a fair amount of George, also getting to serve 14 years with George Hurley. He wrote a lot of good work. He didn't really bring us music, but man, once we brought him the tune, you know, the whole idea of an ensemble making conversation, Georgie always held up his part. So I was really interested in that being my guide. What you're looking for, what I was using for a framework?
Yeah. Like
yeah, I believe it or not, drums do notes. They're very short, but if they're playing a flurry and stuff, they start putting up a lather, and that lather makes a fucking chord. Have you done that? Have you just let a drummer play and then you try different notes on the bass and you find that some work well with what he's got going? I'm talking on a harmonic tip, not the rhythm. Okay, well, that's what I was letting happen. Okay. And also this thing that Eric Dolphy's, to stay on the Eric Dolphy thing, he got something going with Charlie Mingus, even Scott LaFaro on that jazz abstract thing Gunther Schuller did. Richard Davis, bass man here. This thing about conversations where they're actually, instead of the trading 4, trading 8 stuff, they're actually trying to talk to each other, right? And it's kind of jokey vaudeville kind of thing in a way, right? But in a way, I was trying to make a conversation with Mike Pride on these kind of things, like he was speaking to me. So I was trying to answer him. I did one with North Carolina drummer too, Scotty Irvin, in a project called Spirit of Hamlet. John Coltrane was born in Hamlet, North Carolina, and this guy lives near there. And Makoto Kawabata, Benji Johnson on the guitars later on. But the same thing, the idea, why do songs always got to come from the piano or the guitar? You know, from what I understand, music's made of three components: rhythm, melody, and then harmony. But I think with the harmony thing, because of the mathematics, especially what they call classical music, which is really only a couple hundred years, Beethoven, Mozart, you know, right around Isaac Newton time when he's figuring out calculus, because this number game. Of course, humans want to get a shortcut on the truth, you know, so they got to, this is the correct, whatever the fuck. I guess chords, you look on the Greek pots and you see the two flutes in the guy's mouth. Because I think the harps are doing one at a time. But yeah, there's chords, there's harmony. But I wonder sometimes. But I picked up on that with what Mike, whatever it was that came over, he sent me. I wanted to react to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's the chum bucket, you know? And I'm fucking the groper, you know, the big fish, just, yeah. Something like that. I want to be like that. When I started having people on the show that were improvisers, well, the first guy I met that really got into that was Nels Klein. And the mystery has always been to me is like, who knows who to go, who goes first? And is that saying something? Like, who's got the ego problem? Who's got the fucking insecurity thing? Who's the, you know, but in a way, it's part of the mechanics. Somebody does have to go first. But then you can, you know, like most things I found about reality, you take turns. You inhale, exhale. So, yeah, somebody's got to move first in chess, right? But slight advantage. I guess it depends on your perspective. But with three-layer cake, I had Mike Pride go first. And then I reacted to what he did. And then the last man was Brandon Seabrook. And that's why I asked him to name the project Three-Layer Cake. But this thing with the bigotry towards drummers, you know the jokes, these stereotypes. How do you know the drummer's at the hatch? Right? The knocking speeds up and he doesn't know when to come in. Fuck that shit. We're all playing drums. Unless you're fucking Paganini, I guess. 50 million notes before it loops. Wearing a cape.
Are you familiar with like Ornette Coleman's stuff around, what's it called? Harmolodics. He had a whole theory of harmolodics in the 70s, didn't he?
Well, here's the thing. We're talking about this period like Eric Dolphy.
Yeah.
They're all into Charlie Parker. He's the one who takes the bebop thing. I mean, it don't start with him, right? It starts with Bud Powell, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, but he gets it to a fucking thing, right? Ornette ain't from there. I think Ornette's more from R&B and blues. Interesting book I read on who's the tenor man from New Orleans. John Coltrane was very influenced by him. Lester Young.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Lester Young, yeah. He never heard the blues till Minneapolis, a white guy on a 10-inch record. First generation where you didn't have to be there in the room with him. You could listen to this thing called a record. Yeah, singing the blues. And his theory that blues, here's the guy who grew up in New Orleans, never heard the blues till he's up in Minneapolis off a record, right? Frankie Tannenbaum, another Kansas City guy. I get to meet him, but this idea we got of stereotypes, you know, it's just fucked up. So blues being a holler, it's a working music like sea shanties over where you guys are, right? Your hands are full, so you can't work an instrument. It's there's a different kind of timing when you have to breathe and do work. Actually, Mike Pride hit me to Milford Graves. That's how or go see and listen to the Elvin Jones different drummer thing where, yeah, I couldn't play straight time, you know, slows down, speeds up, just like wind and water and all this kind of thing. Well, the same kind of thing. Ornette Coleman, the melody is more important. He's not really concerned with this fucking. I got a chance to hear some YouTube spiel where they ask him what is harmonic, and he says, "Well, it's humans making music for each other."
Yeah.
Nice. That's enough.
You know what I mean? This kind of thing that you're going to get a shortcut if you come up with some formula, because humans do use formulas, and the idea to have predictable behavior, But then at that same time, we try to invent situations that free us of that fucking predictability thing, right? The surprise. But what was so fucking happening to me about going to them punk gigs? Can you imagine seeing Nervous Gender for the first time? It's like, the fuck, if a guy, and I love T-Rex, and that was a great gig, and even that was a mind blow. That wasn't like the record. When I saw the gig, yeah, he did the first 2-3 minutes of the song, but then it didn't fade out. He got on his knees and did Jimmy for 10 minutes, this big old, it's like, what? What was that about, And it got a guy on congas up front that you couldn't hear one note, right? It's an arena. I mean, there's something about surprise and not knowing. And you know what I mean? And I think Ornette got it kind of hip to that. Eric Duffy meets him when comes from Fort Worth, and he's operating an elevator. So he knew him. And that's the thing Joe Baiza was saying the other day when I played with him and Chris Corsano. Incredible drummer, man. He's taught me a lot about this. You don't have to play little ostinatos, little loops. You keep changing all the time. In fact, that's how I do gigs with Chris Corsano. And there's a cat in Long Beach here who plays like him named Matt Crane. I get really close to him. If Georgie saw somebody picking their ass, he'd say, "Hand puppet." And that's kind of what I'm not picking my ass, but what I mean is I'm close on the drums, so I'm actually trying to be his vessel.
Yeah.
Literally let him play through me. You know what I mean? Be so malleable that those notes that get played on the fretboard and plucked are kind of, real-time responses to what he's bringing.
Yeah.
Because these kind of drummers don't, they're not nothing way into Clyde Stubblefield and that stuff, Benny Benjamin, Pistol Pete, beautiful stuff. But they're different. They're this, I'm talking about this Milford Graves guy. The 3-layer cake guy's the guy who turned me on. In fact, a guy made a documentary, moved to Pedro. This guy, his parents named him Neil Young, so he changed his last name to Colica or something. So, fuck that joke, Mom. I have to live with this shit. I knew a guy in grade school. There's Ma named him Elvis, and he changed his name to Donald in junior high. He's like, fuck this shit. Paul Stanley too said something about his daddy. I ain't gonna use that name. He did it. Yeah. Anyway, it's trippy how chance encounters can put sea chains in you. I've learned this time and time that the trick is to keep the mind open, because that's the problem about us getting, whatever.
But
cocksure. And you think, they don't have anything to teach me. I already know that.
Yeah.
And yeah. So the Watford Pedro show, meet Mike Pride, getting to do those records, that helped me get to play with Chris Corsano, Joe Baiza. I go back to Minutemen days. He lived above me or below us. T. Boone lived above Joe Baiza when we started the Minutemen in January of 1980. He's actually from the town next, it's Wilmington, but he moved to Pedro. And now we didn't want to bug the neighbors, so we didn't use amps. So whole time we didn't have a drummer yet. So to get the first batch of tunes together, we're stomping hours. He thought we were up there dancing. I mean, we'd see each other at the gigs. Like I said, there was the same 200 people, and he's very distinctive. But didn't really know each other. That's the trippy thing about a movement, right? Movement is a tricky thing. I think it's a vital thing, but it's not as apparent how it works. If you start nailing that down, it gets like saying everything's about harmony.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel attached to like a movement now, or are you just like you whatever comes along you're sort of involved in?
Well, I think some of the ethics of the movement are still around, and young people who never were, they know about this stuff. There's nobody I have on the show just copies stuff off records like we did in the 70s. You got to understand, no one I knew in Pedro here in the 70s wrote their own songs. The best guy on guitar was the guy who could play Black Dog the best. I mean, yeah, of course. We fucking need. Nobody used music for expression. And I think there's not a young person making music these days that don't see that as a opponent. And I think that's the biggest. I don't think haircuts and beats per minute was the biggest contribution to the movement. I think it was more of an ethical thing where you can use it for expression. Yeah, no shit. But I mean, why is a dog lick its balls?
But
listen, maybe that took centuries for some dog to hip his other fucking buddy. I don't know.
But there's something about that like SST scene, that was really really eclectic. You guys had so much weird stuff happening.
It's informed by the Hollywood scene.
Yeah,
I can't imagine Minutemen without SST and SST without the Hollywood scene. Yeah, they're all informing each other, and you guys too, right? There's a record store here in Long Beach called Zeta London. This guy Mike Zed and his ma, they had a connect with the like Klaus Schulze brain label. There was these hippie psychedelic kind of things before the movement, so they had the in on the independent. So I'm listening to what's his name, alternative TV, Sniffing Glue. What's his name, Mark Perry, that kind of shit. Lemon Kittens and Fall and Pop Group and why. I mean, we would buy these records just by the cover. They were $2 the 7 inches and $5 for the albums. You'd get them by the name of the band or the cover because nobody hardly wrote about it. We did have 2 fanzines, Slash and then Flipside, but so you just roll the dice. Wait till you had time off. So we'd always get the first lesson. We'd eat L. So it'd fucking trip balls when you'd hear this shit because you had no idea what it was going to be like. Can you imagine hearing Prayers on Fire? Yeah, frying your brains. Or what's that cabaret Voltaire? Silent Command. It sounded like a guy was singing. When you turn on the faucet, you sing through the water. What was it called? That it had a Seeds cover. God, what was it called? Not the 7 inch. That was trippy too, but the album was fucking insane. And Throbbing Gristle for a second annual report, and it was anything. I mean, there were some records over here too, but at first you guys had these wild ass records coming out, and then we started doing it too. But we had the gigs, like a lot of those bands we never saw.
Yeah.
From you guys. Wire didn't come till like 87, and Pop Group maybe 2015 or something. Yeah, some of these bands you only knew by their records, and some bands you only knew by the gigs, like what we saw in Hollywood and stuff. We saw some of the first jam gig at the Whiskey and Strangler, Killing Joke, and the first one would be good, but then it'd be just regular shit, Yeah. But the first records by those bands, because, different paradigm, right? Not the guys. I think that they plugged into some system. I liked that In the City record a lot, man. In the first Strangler album. And those gigs, too. The Killing Joke, right? The Tool band's making all kinds of money on their sound. There's all kinds of shit. A lot of these guys were real big groundbreakers. The Buzzcock singer had a band. that came over? Magazine. Yeah, they were trippy. I mean, I got to see some of them, but a lot of them we never got to see. We only knew them by the record. But the records were good, you know. They might be Russians. I remember there was one that the Desperate Bicycles.
Desperate Bicycles.
All kinds of shit. So in a way, that stuff was kind of the GO for us to do what we were doing with the SST and bands up in Hollywood. You know, the Screamers, they didn't even have a guitar. Kind of Fender Rhodes through a fuzz tone, and the drummer played with the drum machine alongside him. No Mercy was just a lady singer, and they were from up in the city. We were really into the Dills, loved Germs. Man, I remember getting the Germs album and the words, because you never heard those things at the gigs. You never sang in the mic, you know. But all that stuff was, you know, a farmer would tell you, if you want a good crop, use a lot of manure. And that's totally just the way it works, it seems. And that's what it was like for us. You know, we were totally a product. I finally got the joke to Pink Flag. You know, they were signed to this big ass label, and their biggest band was Pink Floyd. Right, Harvest. I got to ask. I made a record with Graham, and I met Colin. I should ask him about that. But I think, but that Pink Flag record had such. We were so worried people would know that we listened to Blue Oyster Cult and Creed. You know, we thought we made these little, and then this idea like the pop group had, that we put Funkadelic Cat Beefheart. We just thought these were incredible ideas. And like, why didn't anybody think of this? And of course, the Stooges, I mean, we wouldn't even have had a movement without that band. And then I end up getting to help them for 126 months. Life is a trip, you know.
You're on the biggest selling album, man.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the biggest selling immediately rather than long term, because, you know, everybody's probably got the first 3 or 4 these days. But
I remember the first one I got was Funhouse. I got the second one. And man, none of my friends liked it. Only D. Boone. Actually, me and D. Boone thought the first 3 songs was the same song played 3 different ways. I mean, we were only like, you know, 14, just starting high school. With the summer, going to Pedro High. And nobody liked those guys, man. But man, it was like, whoa. You know, there was one magazine that wrote about him. Richard Meltzer would write about him good in Cream. But everybody else. And I didn't know that they were actually at the time in Hollywood. It was with James Williamson, version, the Raw Power. That's the one I got after. And we could have went and saw those, but we didn't know about music being in clubs. We thought it was only arenas.
Yeah. Fuck
that shit.
Hey,
you know? But you don't know. If you don't know, you know, you don't know, right? You can say all this shit about freedom and all this, but if you don't know, how can you choose? If you think the choices are limited to such kinds of things, you know?
Hey, I was wondering about, you know, you're talking about the Stooges. I was wondering about whether if you're ever tempted to go back to stuff like a Bullhog or Tugboat or Contemplating the Engine Room and sort of touring those albums like other bands, you know, have gone back and toured. Other album bands have gone back and toured their stuff, you know, and the Stooges did it as well. And, you know, how do you feel about that, like, stuff? I've seen you play Minutemen stuff, you know, as well.
No, well, see, I don't know how much you know about Minutemen, but those songs that I play are songs I wrote for the Minutemen. I don't play Georgie songs or D. Boone songs out of respect to them. So when I play those songs for people, I'm actually playing I don't know, the Mike Watt songbook,
Yeah.
but I don't play my whole soundbook. You're right. I don't play much from Ball Hugger Tugboat. I don't think I play any songs I write for Firehose.
Amazing songs. They're great. I love a lot of the fIREHOSE stuff particularly.
But I don't play any songs from there. The only songs I play from the old days that I wrote are kind of the ones I wrote for Minutemen.
Can I just touch on fIREHOSE for a minute? You did a session with John Peel with fIREHOSE. How did it feel, kind of recording the same way as The Fall and all those British bands, The Wire and all these British bands you were just mentioning?
Well, he wasn't there, but I did meet him. I did meet him when he was there for a Jay Mascis one when I was helping him with The Fog. Okay. And it was trippy because I knew him from Tyrannosaurus Rex Unicorn. He reads a poem.
Yeah, he was the big...
Well, I asked him about that in person. And he starts telling me about how Mark Bolan stopped answering his phone calls. And he got really sad. He said, I lived with a guy named Beautiful Paul. He called him Beautiful Paul. And Mark would not pick up the phone. And I was thinking, man, I shouldn't have brought this motherfucking shit up.
No, I think...
But I didn't know, because I was such a big T-Rex fan, but he was very kind to me. And then the next time I saw him was at a festival. Maybe it was All Tomorrow's Parties where he's a DJ guy, and he was chowing by himself, and I didn't want to bother him. And then he was gone, a heart attack or something, the next year.
He's from here where I live, so his wife we see all the time, Sheila. She runs an independent venue called the John Peel Centre, or she's a part of the committee because it's like a charity thing. So we see musicians here see Sheila all the time. And John Peel, during the 80s, he came to gigs in Ipswich where I am a lot, and with his son, with his whole family, and he'd take his whole family to see grindcore gigs. And friends who were there said you'd see like John Peel's 4-year-old son rubbing his eyes because he was tired while bands like Extreme Noise Terror were like ripping through the venue.
Whoa. Well, I mean, okay, here was the trip up. You're asking me about fIREHOSE first, doing one of those things. It was at Abbey Road.
Oh, really?
Not the big timey one, but
not Maidavale.
It was some kind of BBC. The one with Jay Mascis was, but it wasn't the A Studio. And so, I mean, there's something. But as far as the experience, and there was nobody in lab coats. Like you read about old days, right?
Yeah.
Were you disappointed about
that? No, I didn't read about it then. About that, I read about that later. And when I was reading this, like when I was there was no fucking lab coat. It was just dudes, right? So, like recording in Hollywood, $1,500 a day. Okay, Minutemen. I mean, Minutemen never did it for that, but what would you say? Perspective, right? Was almost that much. I remember the tape was $150 new for 15 minutes, 30 IPS. So we'd get used tape for $75, and you would record in downtime, so midnight to 8 a.m. But when I did Ball or Tugboat, that was at Cherokee for $1,500 a day. So you're in there to get shit done. So I'd be cracked up like they were gigs in front of the microphones. That's the way I always played gigs. I always trusted the guys. They were like a guy in the band. The guys running the thing. I had a lot of respect for them. They also probably had a foot in diameter knob, the suck knob that they could turn up to 12 or 13, so there's a politics of that. And, it's so scary, especially if you're into records, that's how you know bands. So this is how you're going to be known. So it's kind of a pants shitter. And I have no confidence in that. Shit in a pecan log, right? So that's how my experience was. Kind of scared.
Yeah, man. It's like you don't get another. I guess it's all fly by your
With
pants.
Jay, with Jay Mascis, he wants to do this medley, like Ruts, Teenage Fan Club, and Pavement. And he breaks the fucking string and he keeps it. Jay Mascis, no fear. Balls like church bells, you know. There's cats like this. Talks a little though.
Yeah.
You know, I'm telling you, like reading these biographies, you know. I got an Ornette Coleman one next. It's a new one written by a woman, Maria Golia. But it's about people. The old days was about people. I think the new days are about people. And that's how parts of the movement is still preserved. It's in the people. And the way the movement cracked open the hatch enough to let some of this shit through that it could never get shut again. And this idea of using music for expression. Now, humans are trendy. I mean, fucking Pat Boone sold more Tutti Fruttis than Little Richard. And that's 1955. So shit's going to get co-opted. Shit's going to get shallow, you know. Watch out where you take the big high dive because you might bust your head. There's a lot of shallow shit. And that's always going to be a problem. But I don't think it should be a deterrent. In fact, it should be an incentive to get hard against hollow, you know. And a lot of this stuff, you know, especially helping the Stooges, they told me in the 60s there was little bands, there was garage bands, little labels, you know, and clubs and shit. That shit, there's just a brief period, you know, Nuremberg rally idea of arena rock, you know. You know what's funny about those days? They didn't know about merchandising. Like my first poster was a T-Rex. It was $2. The gig was $2.50, so this poster was $2, and it was sold about 5 blocks away from the Long Beach Auditorium. That's where they filmed all the Don Kirshner rock concerts. So it was bootleg, and they just, you know, the first one they called T-Rex with Ride a White Swan. They just cut Mickey Finn out and did a Xerox of Mark Bolan. I put that on my bulkhead. You know, that was my first thing.
Yeah, man.
But they didn't know about merch because the gigs were all about promotion for the records. They weren't an entity unto itself. And it's funny because the movement, you put out records, they were like, I remember me and D. Boone having this big talk when we started the Minutemen. It says, we're going to split the world into 2 categories. There's going to be flyers and gigs. And everything that ain't a gig is a flyer. So like records were flyers, the spiels like this, taking pictures, you know, later on video when I was doing fIREHOSE. Now I look back at them, they're like documents. You know, that's the only way I could hear D. Boone.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not just. But what I'm trying to say is like your fundamental understanding, it kind of changes. But it don't have to be ethical sellout, right? It's more like a swerve to avoid thing. And
Sure.
so, you know, that's how I see my journey. You know, it's always going to be a classroom, the way I look at it.
What was it like being on major labels? Did you ever did they ever
14
try
years.
to feed up producers to you and stuff?
14 years. I was on Columbia, 11 years on SST. So actually longer on a major label than independent. But because of the experience of SST, I never had to submit a demo. I was never, people, no suits laid stuff on me. They didn't come in this place. I deliver them finished master. That's what the contract I had Rosemary Carroll write for me. I didn't take advance money, you know, so I'd have a autonomy, man. There's a Buzzcocks song called Autonomy, right? Well, you know, right. Sometimes it ain't just a slogan, right? You get to believing into this shit. Because I see motherfuckers tying the puppet strings on their wrists and ankles and then fucking crying about it later.
Yeah.
No, look. Think of a payphone, right? We don't use those now, but in the old days we did. And if I wanted to call, you could actually put like pound thing in and call my ma from London, right, or Ipswich. And I wouldn't call BT too indie of a company, but if they didn't jump on the line and start telling you what to say, you didn't hang up on them, right? Well, the same thing with AT&T over here. And that's the way you had to keep the relationship, I think. I think there's a responsibility to the fartist. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that I was
I tour. I just did my 73rd tour.
Man,
the U.S. interstate system is a military, right? They were into the Autobahn and shit. The way that asshole used his roads, right? But I use it for touring. So what I'm saying? There's ways, but you don't let some motherfucker jump into the window and grab your steering wheel.
Now, there's always a way. The bands who want
to... The Volkswagen goes by, the limousine goes by. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
The bands who trying to get the notoriety or trying to get the popularity by signing to a major, as you say, tying on the puppet strings. The bands who don't need it, they're the ones who seem to do okay. Okay,
true story. My product manager had me in. He just like rapped me and shit. He wanted me to give spiels to the newly signed bands because he says these guys think they just got gravy train ride thing, and they don't know they've
won the lottery.
Yeah, they won the Sucker Boy Lotto. And I remember him pointing. He'd have these gold records on his bulkhead. One's Lover Boy, one's Warrant, and see what this one lasted a year. See what this one lasted 2 years. There's all this shit that was cornball, and I just never entertained that. The one thing why I went to a major was the distribution. The problem with the independents was there was a lot of crooked independent distributors that really lamed out a lot of labels. Because you couldn't sell directly to the stores, Well, in some cases you could, but not a lot of them. That was the big kink in the hose with the independent scene. So major labels had their own distribution, which probably goes back to what jukebox mafia shit, right? No, think about it. This idea of the one stop. I mean, what Hitman? It's not just radio promo. That's distribution too. So that's the one thing. If I could get the autonomy I had at SST, then Columbia is what 1888. I mean, the first things are cylinders. It look like toilet paper rolls.
Wax.
So I remember Dottie Einer wanted to know what I wanted to do after Ball Hog or Tugboat. And I said, I want to do an opera about three guys in a boat. It's just me and him at the top. They called it 550 Death Star, right? That AT&T building in Manhattan. And he's not blinking, right? What do you want to do? Tell me what I'm thinking. And I said, well, I want to do an opera about three guys in a boat. He says, do it. And he's telling me about relative of his man who drove a truck and stuff. I mean, I don't think I had magic wand or some shit. I mean, you know what I mean? Some of these cats, I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but they're into royalty.
Yeah.
They want to be part. And you know what I mean? But I like music. I got in a band to be with my friend. I mean, I take this shit serious.
Yeah. How does it, I mean, in that way, does it sort of, you look back at it and go, fuck, you've made a whole life out of it? Do you ever think of that?
Yeah. I told you I'm grateful to D. Boone's mom. I mean, I'm a son of a sailor. He only saw me play once. He didn't know what I was doing. He knew it was something I did with my buddy, but when he got killed, he didn't know why I kept doing it. So I started sending postcards from tour. And he's like, whoa, you're like a sailor. You've been to all these places.
That's great. I like that. I
You
like
know,
that.
yeah. So yeah, you know, it is a trip. And then you get there, right? No, maybe you never do get there. You just always. There's also a Don Quixote part of it. You know, you sally forth, you roam, you roost, you come back. The bungee cord brings me. I moved here from Virginia when I was 9. You know, to Pedro, and because Vietnam was closer, he was a machinist mate in the Navy, and that's what was happening in those days. So, circumstance. I mean, you get dealt the hand, and then you have something. You have stuff to say about that, but it is a weird kind of mixture. So when you say you've made a life out of it, I can't say 100%. Although I've had to work hard at it, you're right about that. But a lot of it has been getting dealt the hand, like being born with bad knees. You know, I walk with a crutch now. The surgeries I had in my 20s wore out, and I don't want to get cut anymore. But I have no pain. So, yeah, I can't do cartwheels or skydive. But I still got my hands that can work basses. So you do make choices, and they do have consequence. But I can't say I completely made it all myself. Andrew, does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I think, you know, we're talking about these guys who just, they want to start.
And Sam, does that make, you asked it actually, but yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, man. I mean, you talked about when we first started talking. You talk about, you know, life as like collaboration rather than necessarily this thing.
And look at my work too. Being a bass player, I mean, bass players like glue, and with nothing to stick to, you're just a fucking puddle. You know, that's Wes Montgomery with playing with his fingers because he cracked in bed, and he didn't want to bug his wife. So he learned how to play without a pick. Yeah, I'm telling you, read these books, man. It's about people. It's strange about this shit. I found 10 on John Coltrane. It's good when you find them written by them, but there's not a lot. The
Mingus one is crazy.
Yeah, well, his son Eric told me there's 900 pages that weren't in there. You know, and he's got them. He says he's going to have them come out. I mean, no Danny Richmond. It's trippy. He put his fingers like quote signs, salacious Negro stories. So he said him and his buddy got some whiskey and just made up shit.
It's
like, fucked up.
Yeah,
fucked up.
And then
do you know about the two? You know about the two dancer rule? You know, Bill Robinson, in the Shirley Temple movies, Mr. Bojangles was his nickname.
No, I don't know that.
You know, there was a law. You couldn't have one brother dance. You had to have another brother dance with it. I mean, that's fucked up shit. And you know Nick Tosh's book I got right here, Richard Meltzer's friend. You got to read this. It's called his first book, The Twisted Roots of Country Music and Rock and Roll. It actually comes out of minstrel. I mean, the minstrel is one of the most insane. I mean, even before vaudeville, the 1800s. Vaudeville has a lot to do with it too, but it comes later. Early 1800s. Fucking minstrel. I mean, it was banjos at first, then guitar, because that's what came from there. But, you know, humans, weird species.
Yeah.
Weird species. But think about bass like this. This is my understanding. Yeah, when I was younger, more younger, 4-string guitar. But as I get less younger, 4-string drum set. Here's my rationale. It's not just being cute with language. You know, you take the K out of punk rock, you got punk rock. Okay, but here's the science behind it. You take a baritone guitar, right? Jack Bruce, I Feel Free in that video. I guess it was film. Fender 6, right? It's tuned down an octave, but they don't sound like basses. Those little strings don't give you that thump. The big strings do. That's why I say 4-string drumstick.
How do you write these days? Are you like meticulous, or do you like to leave a lot of room for when you sort of actually get in the space with people?
Okay, absolutely. Get this. I'm thinking springboard, launch pad. I'd never have the tune realized. I write. This is. Don't you hate it when he gave me a bass line? No. He can write verses, choruses, intros, outros, bridges. But harmonically, we leave a lot to your collaborator. We're actually, I call it playing the holes. We're giving them holes. If you don't give them, how can they play them? And the bass is built physically that way with its narrow harmonic thing. So I think it's one of the most excellent songwriting tools. I think that's actually one of the futures, along with drummers. Drummers too. You notice, go to Cliff Martinez's. A lot of drummies get into this soundtrack work. I wonder why. Because the guy in the rear with all the gear, he's got perspective. He's big picture shit. I think that's kind of where we are too. The guy I saw in magazine, Barry Adamson.
Yeah, Barry Adamson. Yeah.
Right? Bass man, does film work. I wonder why. I think it's a sensibility of the machinery we're operating. So that's the way I approach it. I mean, keel, bow, stern. There's even different kinds of masts, right? Mizzen, fore, mid. It takes a lot of parts. They aid and abet. It's all right. You take turns. Builds empathy.
Are you working on anything now? At the moment?
Fuck. Because of the internet, you don't have to use it just for spreading lies and hate. You can actually collab. I always get this. Alan Ravenstein from Perubu sent me the last thing. I played a gig, the last gig David Thomas ever did. I opened up the gig with my Missing Men, and by the way, almost done with the Missing Men album.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm doing right now. But Alan gave me with him and David. But when I played that gig and went to thank David at the end, the last words he said to me was, because he lived in your country. He lived in Brighton.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And he said, Mike, I wish you lived in England. That's David Thomas's last words to me.
Oh, man.
And one of the most beautiful things I got to do, I made a band with an England guy in Brighton named Sam Duke.
Yeah.
He helps out the boss. Yeah, Cuz. And what we got to do on that tour was fucking the Slider. My dream was always to do a T-Rex song with an England guy, and I got to do that. So, and that was in 2015. That was 10 years ago. So, there's this thing of realizing things, but then you're looking at the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Why not? That's what, there's a documentary with Rashid, right? Ali, the last drummer of. I got to meet him once. He's wearing a turtle shell for a hat. See, why is John Coltrane always pracking? How he's much better. But see, it would probably get something down, and that would lead to another possibility, and like peeling an onion. So I got that to do. A guy named Wasco in Cleveland that just gave me 6 songs. It's got like Brendan Canny from Fugazi on it, and Nels Klein on guitar. The possibilities of collaborating through the internet are really incredible,
I didn't really know what to expect speaking to Mike Watt, and I know probably more about him as a person than I do about his music, and I'll be honest about that. But that was not what I was expecting. Was that what you were expecting?
It was at the beginning, but it got sort of I think it sort of clicked in really nicely at some point, and he was really sort of generous with his time, and he's really generous with his sort of listening to us and asking us questions at points, and
Yeah.
I was sort of caught off guard by that because I was like, it was very pleasing to have a conversation with the man rather than just sort of like sort of feeling like you have to sort of just ask him questions. And I guess that's the point, is like his whole point is it's all about collaboration. The best things come out from collaboration, and you don't know what you're going to get if you don't just say yeah to everything, basically.
I mean, over the last many, many years, fuck knows how many people I've interviewed, for music, for other reasons. And you can tell when somebody, well, it's become obvious to me when somebody sort of snaps into PR mode,
Yeah.
and they sort of go a bit dead behind the eyes, and they're just, they might as well be just scrolling through TikTok while they're giving the answers, because they've given the same answers so many times. They're well prepped. They've got their team around them, and they're just doing press shit. That was an actual conversation with Mike Watt. I mean, at the beginning, obviously you poked him in a way that he was more than willing to respond to, kind of talking about jazz, and it's really nice to hear him talk about that side of his career. And then we sort of snapped in, and it just became a chat. I was looking at the clock while we were recording, and I'm very aware this is the longest episode of Beat Motel we've ever made.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to say sorry, Mr. Mike Watt.
I think we can always return for another one, maybe when he's got a new album out, because there's so much that one wants to ask him, because he's such a sort of, he tells you these little snippets of things, and you sort of I want to go back into the details, like, what whiskey did he drink for 50 years?
There's some bits, right, where
was it a fine single malt? Was it like, rye?
When I'm, I want some whiskey now. When I speak to some people, if I'm really enjoying the conversation during an interview, and I say this not in so much in Beat Motel, because it's a very different vibe for Beat Motel, but outside of that, I can sometimes get the sense towards the end of interview, I sort of start to mourn it ending, and I'm thinking, fuck, I am never going to get to speak to this person again. This is my one opportunity, and because it's kind of my job outside of Beat Motel, I can't grab it for me. I can't go, fuck, I'm never going to get the chance again. Right, here's all the stuff I want. We can do that with Beat Motel. We absolutely can, if it's not going to alienate the guest. But with Mike Watt, I was thinking, I sort of like, shit, he's going to be gone soon, and this will be over. Then I thought, it's Mike Watt. I know so many people who've had such long conversations with him, like in the backs of their cars at gigs and stuff. I thought, hey, this might be a case of, do you remember the first time we spoke to Mike Watt?
Let's try and get him on as like an annual thing, maybe.
And Mike Watt Day.
Let's see if he notices. Hey, you guys again.
I bet he fucking will. Some of the anecdotes that he came up with, he'll remember.
He's got a memory. I mean, he does seem to have a memory like an elephant. Sort of being able to place. I can't place those fucking ATPs. He can place ATPs.
He was correcting us about which ATP it was for certain things, wasn't he? Which was always.
Yeah.
I remember that is the first time I saw him was it an ATP. Anyone who just listened to audio only, you missed out on a very relaxed man. Lives it? Was it Long Beach now? Long Beach, California.
I think it's probably still Pedro. Did he say Long Beach? Yeah.
I sort of flip between saying Long Beach, but sort of referring to Long Beach sort of over there. But I worked it out while we were speaking to him. The recording started for me at 7 p.m. UK time. Sam, it started, 9?
9 p.m., yeah.
9 p.m. For him, it was 11 a.m.
Yeah.
Probably one of the first people he'd spoken to today. And he was sat, I assume he wasn't completely naked, but he was certainly comfortably clothed.
This is Beat Motel Goes OnlyFans.
I think it's so perfect. Like, as soon as he came on, I was like, "There's a relaxed man," and we accidentally spooked him because Sam and I wanted to do sound check before recording, completely forgetting that it would.
We don't know how Discord works.
And it would ring him. So we were here like 20 minutes earlier. Like Mike Watt pops up. Hello. That's not what his accent is. And we sort of had to be a bit sheepish and go, sorry, yeah, we kind of fucked this up. But he's very charming, very open, very enjoyable. That was an absolute treat.
Yeah, man, he's like, it makes me want to do more, but I also get scared of that. But I think if we do more, we just stick to people we're interested in. And
oh God, I am not going back on I've been, not for any publication I've run, but I've been on the PR train in the past in music, and fuck that. I'm not speaking to anyone. I spoke to Mick from Prolapse, who is, in a very different way, sort of my Mike Watt, and it was a delight. And I felt like equals. I felt like he was an equal. I wasn't, he wasn't uppity. I wasn't fawning over him. That's what Beat Motel's about.
I used to, when I was working as a mute journalist, like 15 years ago, over 15 years ago, I used to agree to do the interviews so I could get into the gigs.
Oh, Yeah, no. Oh, fuck yeah. That's the way it worked. And I used to feel bad for some PRs I knew. I'm not going to mention any names, but there was one guy who I genuinely really, really liked. And he was so kind to us and so kind to anyone who just wanted to get a foot in the door. He was wonderful. And I sometimes wondered if he might have done better with a better photographer, which I was doing at the time, or a better interviewer than having me. I remember interviewing Laura Jane Grace once with a very drunk Mafro. Hello, Mafro, if you're listening. And I've mentioned this on Beat Motel before, but asking Laura Jane Grace who can run fastest in the band, and she just sort of looked at me like, not in a mean way, but like, who the fuck are you? Oh man, right. I was going to say we'll sleep well tonight, but I think I'll probably still be buzzing. That was cool.
No, yeah, I'm gonna. It's gonna take a while for me to calm down.
Let's scrape you
You
off the
don't.
scene.
They say don't meet your heroes. Just don't have the heroes or dicks.
Well, that's the glory of punk rock. They're not heroes. They're just people you think I'd like to speak to one day who's done some cool shit.
I know, but Mike, what I love. There are so many bands, and musicians who sort of get into their thing and just stick at it and stick at it and stick at it. And he does not come from like a punk, rock, a jazz background. He comes from this sounds like pretty self-taught, crazy
I love
background.
the fact he says he only plays bass because D Boon's mum put him
Yeah,
on bass.
yeah. But like he has this, he keeps just sort of, he also said that he still hasn't figured it out. And I just think like here's a guy who looks at what he does as art rather than what he does as just sort of playing, I don't know, punk rock or jazz or anything. It's just an art form to him. It's just the medium of expression, isn't it?
I'm fully aware he won't listen to this, or is very unlikely to, because he speaks to a lot of people all the time. But Mike, if you are listening, thank you. I really appreciate your time for
Thanks,
that.
Mike. Cool, man.
Have we got anything smart to wrap up with, or should we just press stop?
I think we should. Can we tag music on the end of this?
Let's have a look. We've got this. I don't know what this does. Well, that was horrible. I genuinely don't know what just happened. Nah, let's just go. See you later, Sam.
Take care.